This is the Following the Joy podcast, a place to talk about being the best version of yourself, following your heart, making the changes needed, and having fun on this adventure we call life. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, then I invite you to stick around. I'm your host, Debbie Westwell, and this is Following the Joy. In this episode, I talk to jewellery designer, art gallery owner, and genuine, fabulous, creative lady, as well as podcast host, Nicole Gariepy. She's absolutely awesome. She lives in the Caribbean. She's come through a lot of experiences in her life, which she shares with us. And her mission is basically to create beauty and share it throughout the world and inspire others to do the same. And I definitely came away from this interview feeling super inspired to be creative. She's a wonderful human being. She encourages other creatives to kind of inspire people and talks about where she gets her inspiration from. We kind of discuss a little bit about confidence. We discuss, as I said, some of the things that she's been through and what's brought her to where she is now. We discuss sobriety, and this interview will knock your socks off. So I hope you love it. Alrighty. So hi, Nicole. Welcome to Following the Joy podcast. I'm so excited to have you on.
Hey, Debbie. I'm super happy to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to kick off straight away. I'm just going to get you to introduce yourself to our listeners, and then we'll just flow from there, because I've got a whole bunch of questions for you probably, but we'll just see where it goes.
Okay, amazing. Yes, so my name is Nicole Gariepy, and I am a creative and artist at heart. So what most people find really interesting about me is that I live in the Caribbean. So I live in the US Virgin Islands. It is a tropical paradise. And I actually grew up here. So I've lived here since I was a teenager. And yes, I'm an artist. I was a ballet dancer when I was young. I almost had a career in ballet, but I decided to go into jewelry design instead. Number one, it's better money, but it's a little less intense on the body and the mind and things like that. So now I also, in addition to being a jewelry designer, I own an art gallery. So I sell art for other artists. And creativity and art has just been such a huge part of my journey, because it's the thing that's lit me up about life. And there's a whole process to that, to where I got to where I am now, where I really feel like I'm living the fullest expression of my life because of unlocking the creativity. And that doesn't exactly have to do with creating my jewelry or creating art. It's about creating my life. So, yeah,
that sounds awesome. The fullest expression of yourself. That's just such a strong statement. I genuinely love that. And also, can I just say, I'm very jealous that you are in the Caribbean. I am in the UK and my toes are cold. It's raining outside, and I absolutely love the Caribbean. But okay, so ballerina, that's super interesting. Also, your toes probably thank you for turning to art instead of ballet. But how long were you a ballerina for?
So I was started in creative movement when I was a little child, as early as you can, three years old or so, where you're just bumbling around, you're not really dancing. So my parents had me in dance, and it didn't stick. But then I always loved dance, and I went back to it when I was about 11 years old, which is super late in the ballet world. If you're not dancing starting at age 3 and then continuing, basically forget it. But I started back up at age 11, and I got really, really serious about it. Yeah, it was really my life when I was a child. So, so yeah, that was.
So do you still dance, or when did you stop dancing?
No, so I was actually just trying to think about that. So when I was 17 years old, I was actually offered a spot in a dance company.
Wow.
And it was, they're really, just to be very honest about the whole thing, I didn't have a ballet dancer's body. I wasn't large, but I wasn't a perfect ballet body. And that was really hard on me. So I battled with that for, all of my teenage years, of course. And at age 17, I said, I don't think I can do this to myself for the rest of my life. So I still continued to dance, even though I wasn't doing it with a career focus in mind. So I still took classes. I taught ballet for a long time, and I did choreography for like different theater productions in our community theater. So I probably was still in the dance world until my early 30s is probably when I
Oh,
officially
wow.
stopped. I transitioned to
Oh.
yoga, which, being nicer to my body, going from ballet to yoga, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being little and well, not being little, as in my like reflections. I never went to ballet or anything like that. And I once said to my mum, "Why did you never send me to ballet lessons?" And she was like, "I asked you and you said no." And I was like, "All right, okay, rock and roll," for my mum being like Miss Independent. Like, no, she doesn't want to go to ballet. I asked her, it's fine. And I'm kind of glad I didn't. I definitely don't have a dancer's body. But I know that like I've got dancers as friends and not necessarily ballet dancers, but I know that it's such a tough industry. It's very competitive, isn't it, as well? And I mean, fair play to you for saying there that, kind of the age of 18, you're like, no, like it's not for me, it's going to affect me mentally because that's, I mean, is there a lot of pressure on you to stay a certain size and a certain weight and stuff? And has that affected you moving forward, or were you able to kind of like separate from it as you moved over into yoga?
Oh yeah, no, I was not able to separate from that. I mean, body image issues also run in my family, so that
Oh,
was really difficult. And actually, part of this company offer, there was this company that was interested in me, and one of the contingencies was I would be able to be a part of this company, but I had to lose a certain amount of weight to do it. And
oh my
yeah,
goodness.
I grew up in a vegan family, so we were already very healthy, and they wanted to send me to a nutritionist and all of this, and it was just too much. I had already had my body scrutinized for so many years, and
Yeah.
because you're in leotards and tights, and people are looking at
Yeah.
you, and you go to auditions. I had an audition where the auditioner actually told me I needed to lose weight, so I just I didn't have the heart to do it. And this is what's really interesting because I think a lot of people can get past that. They can say, I'm still going to go. I'm still going to try to do this thing. Yes, it's hard. Yes, people are critiquing me. I couldn't I couldn't get myself to that place where I wasn't totally wrapped up in my worth being how I looked. And
But
I just
that's like so emotionally mature. Like probably like reflecting back and going through a trauma of, making decisions like that. But I think that's so emotionally mature because some people it will trigger them for the rest of their life, or they'll be constantly chasing that like that skinny figure, or that like I've got to lose however many more pounds, or I've got to look a certain way. And I don't think it's just with ballet, is it? It's with a lot of things like nowadays. It's kind of one of my little bugbears, this, because I just think everybody should just love themselves as they are and try not to fit. I guess you were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole in a way, because even though you love dance and ballet, like you said, your shape is not a ballet dancer's shape unless you completely change your lifestyle in order to do that. I'm a beauty therapist by trade, and I'm exactly the same because I did never really liked the whole fake nails, fake eyelashes, like everything like that. I'm just more of a natural, like you all look beautiful as you are. You're perfect as you are, but just maybe not perfect for the things that you're doing. I guess. But, oh, that's super interesting. Sorry, I feel like that was just like a little like dip into your history and psyche
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there.
absolutely.
But obviously there's like that golden thread that goes through, because with dance it's expression, isn't it? And same with creative art is expression as well. So I mean, let's talk about your jewelry because it's beautiful. Everybody needs to have a look. It's called Fantasy, as in FANTASEA, Fantasy Jewelry. I'll put a link in the show notes anyway. When did you start getting into making jewelry?
So it's interesting. It was really about the same time that, the company offer with the dance didn't, I chose not to do that basically. I had worked at a jewelry store as a part-time job in high school, and I was just enamored by the world of jewelry. I think a lot of people, if you're not in the industry, we think about jewelry as being something pretty. Okay, everybody maybe gets an engagement ring when they get married, or you get some pearls for your graduation. And I know there are different traditions in different countries around jewelry. But it's, there's a whole science behind the gemstones. And obviously, when I started making jewelry, that's a whole trade. So I never really thought about how vast this industry was until I was working in it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. There's so much to do within this jewelry world. And I had a wonderful boss and business mentor who was just so encouraging. And he kind of gave me all of the avenues. He said, well, go and do this if you're interested in being a gemologist, which is what I ended up doing to start. I went to GIA, which is an international gemological school. They're around the world.
I've got my diamond certificate with them.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Yeah.
I sold diamonds on cruise ships for a while.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So, there's so many different, parts of it. So it took me a while to get into actual manufacturing. I thought, did the GIA certifications, and I'm like, this is great. I worked as a buyer and a manager in jewelry, and I thought I was fine with that. But there's that creativity piece where I was like, I want more, and I want a hand in making the stuff that I'm selling, because I'm like selling all this beautiful jewelry, but I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm picturing something that looks like this instead. So I apprenticed with some of the jewelers at the store I worked with. I asked so many questions. I must have driven everybody crazy because I wanted to know everything. We had a gem cutter. I learned all about gems at the beginning from them, the bench jewelers. And then I eventually went to a school to learn how to all of the actual processes in manufacturing. And yeah, now I am where I am. I have a great business that I love, and I get to be creative every day.
I think that's awesome. I'm in awe of you, because on my bucket list, and I keep looking at them locally, is I want to go and learn silversmithing jewelry, just to create a ring or to create something. I don't know what it is. It calls to me. It's like I really want to go and make something, and I've just never gotten around to do it. So 2024, this is it. I'm going to go and do it this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love
there's
that
so
you were
many
just
options.
yeah. And I feel like that's such an important thing that you've just said. Ask questions. Like I was always raised, just ask questions. Like there's no bad questions, so just keep asking. And even though you think you're probably going to annoy people, I feel like, yeah, that's it. Just ask questions and go and do something amazing and try it, I guess, because you might not like it, you might like it. But yeah, I love it. I love it. And then you work with art as well. So do you do any of the paintings, drawings, or are you selling other people's?
I don't. I'm selling art for other people right now. I was always in art classes in school, art electives. I always love to create things. So I would love, obviously, just from, this conversation, I'm a pretty busy person. So, I would love to have time to paint, but that's just not something that's in the cards right now. One day. So I'm not doing any of that. I do sell paintings and fine art photography for other artists, because, there's this unfortunate thing that a lot of artists are not good at showing up and marketing themselves or selling themselves. And my performance background really gave me a leg up on that. I'm good at that. I'm good at showing up. I love to talk to people. So I really wanted to be a platform where I can, sell art for people who aren't really good at doing that themselves. Yeah. The next step is I really want to teach artists how to show up for themselves. That is really, that's really something that lights me up, because it's sort of like, sure, you need that for your art if you're going to make a living from it. But I think it also unlocks this layer of the self-confidence that a lot of people just don't have naturally. And well, I won't say naturally, because I didn't have it naturally. Being on stage, a lot of times you're just like putting on an act. But I got to a place where I was like, wait, I have to kind of fake it till I make it. But now I'm like, this is very genuine. It's not an act anymore.
Yeah, I love that. I love the whole confidence piece, because I'm a little bit like you. I genuinely love standing up in front of people and talking. And people always say to me, like, how do you do that? And then working on ships, I did it in front of thousands of people. But I actually I'm the same as you. I'm just like, well, I kind of just fake it until I make it. And also, I'm just quite relaxed with it. So I think
Yep.
people kind of almost have that anxiety of anticipation, don't they? Where they are like in their head, they're already telling themselves a story that it's going to go this way and this is going to happen. And what happens if people don't look at me or like fall asleep in the audience or whatever it is that's going on in their brain? And I can remember being on stage and like literally having people just looking at me with blank expressions. And I still like, I'm confident, but I still get nervous. I've always got sweaty armpits when I'm doing like a big presentation or something like that. That's just how my nerves come out. And I remember saying to these people, goodness gracious, can you please like smile at me because I've got sweaty armpits and I'm standing up here and you're making me nervous like this. But it kind of just broke the ice. So I guess like what you want to do there is amazing, because some artists would be natural introverts, wouldn't they? Or some would be kind of, you know, if you put your heart and soul into something, you feel very vulnerable, don't you? I guess when you are then going to try and sell that or share that, and maybe within the art world, some pieces they just don't want to share because it's too close to the emotions that they had when they were creating it. So I think that's such a wonderful thing that you can do. But so what piece of advice would you give to anybody who's listening to this? Not necessarily about creativity and artwork, but just kind of showing up for yourself and a bit of confidence. Have you got any tips there?
Yeah, so I think, I think part of it, the first thing is that it goes back to fear, right? We're all afraid of what people are going to think about us. And one thing that I've heard over and over again is we're not really afraid of the whole world. We're afraid of like one or two people who said something unkind to us at one point in our
Oh my
lives,
goodness,
right?
yes.
We're
Yeah.
worried about, Becky from high school or somebody from our childhood, or maybe even something that, your weird uncle said. So it's very rare that, I think people in general are really curious, and they like to see real people. That's part of it. They like to see the authenticity. So I think the advice is to think about what you're really afraid of in showing up, because I think that starts to take the power away from it, where, you know, there is that fear of what could possibly happen. And the way I look at it, this is something I've really had to learn, is we sort of let go of the outcome. If we're sharing something that is really meaningful to us, I think the magic is in maybe it resonates with one person, just one person. And if if we can touch one person, that would be amazing. But not trying to control that, just really authentically showing up and letting that land for the people it needs to land for.
Yeah. And I guess absolutely right with that one person, because then that has a ripple effect, doesn't it? And I think also you're not going to be everybody's person. Not everybody is everybody's person. And so I guess it's learning to just, kind of let that roll over your shoulders and just be like, okay, if I'm not for you, that's fine. I will be the right person for somebody else, or the right piece for somebody else, or whatever. So,
and that's huge. That's literally it. We should never, I mean, that's probably the bigger piece of advice, what you just said there, is we should never try to please everybody. You, especially as an artist, you have your own special sauce, you have your own unique thing about you. We all have that. And it's about like tapping into what that is and sharing that, because you are going to find your tribe. It's like the cliche, your vibe attracts your tribe, but it really, really does. And that's who you want. Those are the
yeah.
people who are going to love what you do when you're being totally authentic and not trying to make your work like accessible to everybody.
Yeah. I love that. Your vibe is your tribe. Alrighty. So that's awesome, because what I want from this podcast is I want people to know that there are people out there like living authentically and just doing what lights them up, and like the making the life work with it, whether that's doing something that as a passion project, and then having a job at the side, whether that's following your dreams and doing your jobs, that's coming through the big changes. And I know like when I'm talking about big changes, you had like a massive year in 2017 that kind of changed your world around. Would you mind kind of talking about that, sharing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about that, it started probably just a couple of years before 2017, because so I had a business, a jewelry business of my own early in my career, and I closed it in 2009. I went back to work for another jeweler. Basically, I thought, oh, I don't want to do it on my own anymore. I'm just going to head down, work for somebody else. And I'm just an entrepreneur at heart. That didn't last. So I ended up leaving that job in 2015. So,
Okay.
that was the beginning of me starting to try to take back control over my life after, I closed my first business because of creative burnout, actually. And then went to work for somebody who, it was a great business. It was a great experience, but it didn't resonate with me. It wasn't in my heart.
Yeah.
So
We're just going to interrupt you there a second. When you say creative burnout, do you mean like constantly trying to create pieces and just feeling like you weren't hitting it, or what's your definition of that?
So creative burnout for me in this situation was I had a thriving I had a money-making business, let me say. My business was doing extremely well. It was a multiple six-figure jewelry business. So I was doing great numbers. I was making great money, and I decided to close it because I didn't have enough time to be creative. I was spending so much time on the business side of things that I couldn't do any of the work that lit me up. So that was creative. That was my creative burnout.
That's interesting. And I think probably some people will be in exactly the same situation as you, because the more you get in any career pathway, journey, any kind of thing, you start with a passion, don't you? And then as you progress through the ranks, so to speak, you stopped doing what you loved doing in the first place, and you just end up being a pen pusher with paperwork and bills and organizing and stuff. So
yes, absolutely. So that so I had gone back to work for another, and it was great that I was still working within my industry, but it was just like it wasn't a great fit. So I ended up leaving that job, and that was an excellent choice. So I was starting to build up my business again, but in a way that supported my creativity. So that was good. I was I was sort of mucking around with that because it was a whole different thing, and I was doing more e-commerce and selling online instead of my business before had been brick and mortar.
Yeah.
So I'm figuring that out. So 2017, as you said, was a big year for me. And, it was the beginning of the year. And I just wasn't, I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I was still like, what's my purpose here? I think most people have that question. And especially if you identify as an artist or creative, I think we more than others are just like, oh my God, I have to be doing something that is fulfilling and meaningful in life, right? And I hadn't found what that was. And I was like, my goodness, I need to figure this out. So I do pick like an intention word of the year every year. And this one, like finding joy, came to me. And it was I was just shocked by it. And sometimes that's what happens. Like I'm meditating on something and it's like the same thing keeps coming up. And I'm like, how the heck am I going to find joy? I'm actually kind of miserable.
Oh no.
So, and the backstory on that was I was in a relationship that was it just wasn't healthy for me. And I won't go too much into that, but I was in a relationship with a man who was an alcoholic, and it was extremely hard. It's like that kind of a thing in your life. It's like the fire that needs to be put out. Nothing else can really happen because you're focusing on this fire all the time. So, so that was really distracting. And at the beginning of 2017, this whole finding joy thing was, in my awareness. And I actually ended up taking a vacation with a girlfriend, which was just really, doesn't sound that strange, but my life was so like structured and like I did the same thing all the time that going and taking a vacation without my partner was actually kind of just felt crazy. And I went on this vacation. It was a music cruise with my girlfriend, and we had this like life change. Like for me, it was life changing. We had this amazing experience. We went to see this one particular musician, ended up meeting his tour manager and hanging out with him. And it was like, and the musician is Michael Franti, for anybody who wants to know. He's amazing. I actually just got back from another cruise that he was on, or his cruise a couple months ago. So it was this like, I just remembered what it was like to have fun. And, music is just such a great energizer. So I'm like listening to this music. Michael Franti just creates he's such an amazing just business person, not just musician, because he creates this community with his fans, and it's all about like unconditional love and just being kind to one another. So he's just this amazing person. So that vacation just totally changed my life. And I came back home and I looked at everything like, okay, my life has to change. I need to get in that feeling more. So I wanted to try to work things out with my partner. We sort of started working on that. I ended up just a few months later, after going to see Michael Franti in concert again, hanging out with the tour manager again. I came back from that trip, and I knew I had to end this relationship. And that was really hard. We owned property together, and we had been together for 7 years. So it was, our lives we were building a life together. So there was a lot of stuff to work through there, and we're still living together. And hurricane season, living in the Caribbean, here's hurricane season. And we have the worst hurricane season of I've lived on the island I live on, St. Croix, for 30 years. So, well, back in 2017, it wasn't 30 years, but the worst hurricane season of, my experience here. We had 2 Category 5 storms in the same month, and it was just absolute insanity. And I always sort of like,
So I was just going to say, for people in the UK, because obviously I worked in the Caribbean on cruise ships, so I understand hurricanes, and I remember this season because I remember that was the year that I came off ships, and I remember looking and just being absolutely traumatized by, watching things, and so seeing buildings that I'd been in like just totaled and everything. But for British people, we don't have a huge amount of hurricanes, so the category system, Category 5 is the highest. It is the highest of a hurricane, and it's generally total devastation. It takes things out, it takes lives with it. It's to do with like speed, isn't it, and wind speed and stuff.
Wind speed, So wind speed is, and I don't know how this won't exactly translate, but a Category 5 hurricane, I believe, is 150 miles per hour and up.
Wow, which is huge and terrifying, I guess, if you're in the middle of it. So
Yep. So one thing I always say about hurricanes, and it sounds funny because there is so much devastation, but there's another kind of like clearing that happens with hurricanes. There's just like nature clears out. I mean, people who aren't supposed to live on this island leave because they can't handle it. There's like it's this really interesting natural purge.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
I felt like, with everything going on in my life, this crazy hurricane season was also clearing and purging things out of my life. So, it was actually after the storm that I decided to get sober. And I wasn't a big drinker, but I was in a relationship with a man who was an alcoholic, and I had, been focusing on his drinking for so long. And I said, well, what if I stopped drinking? It doesn't really affect my life that much, but what if I do this? So I did. And, that was over 6 years ago, and I still haven't had a drink since. And the amount of mental clarity that came out of that for me was incredible. I was like, wow, even my, well, I would drink a bottle of wine. I was like, even my 1 bottle of wine, 2 nights a week was enough to sort of cloud my thinking and also cloud my creativity. Ooh. So it just opened up so much for me that I felt like I had just been, giving myself a handicap basically by drinking. So yes, my entire life changed in 2017, from, just finding my joy again, which by the end of the year, I said, well, I totally understand why this intention of finding joy came up for me in the beginning of the year. So that life-changing vacation, leaving a relationship that wasn't serving me, getting sober, and just, having my mind opened in such an amazing way.
Yeah. So, there's so much in there. I mean,
there's so much.
I love the fact that, like, I think this with rain, because we have a lot of rain in the UK, so I think it's cleansing. I think sometimes it's good to get out in the rain and just let it do whatever it needs to do to you to cleanse you out. But I guess a hurricane psychologically and physically, because it literally comes as spirals, takes things, destroys things. And I guess, like you said, anything that's not strong enough to continue will be destroyed by it. And then everything that is strong enough, like the people who stay on the island, who live on the island, you know, remain there, and then creates probably a better bond with other islanders as well. Because, I mean, did you lose anything in those hurricanes, or were you pretty okay?
I was quite fortunate. We had flooding. I had flooding, and but insurance takes care of a lot of that, so I didn't have to really pay out of pocket for most of the damage. So yeah,
Okay.
I was quite fortunate.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And then doing something different, that's kind of like a term that I almost really only learned this year, but I've always done it, if that makes sense. But then I've obviously like labeled it. So just doing something different, like you said, like just going on holiday with your girlfriend, or going on vacation with your girlfriend, and just doing something different, going on like a music cruise. And like you said, music is great for the soul anyway. It sounds good. You can move your body, which kind of relaxes you a little bit. But by doing something different, it just opened up a whole new world for you. And then you were like, oh, I've been in this like little box for a while of dealing with other people's problems and my relationship, and then you realize, oh, maybe I'm not as happy as I thought I was, because you start to see what else is out there. So I think if anybody's listening to this, like a good takeaway there is just try something different, like we said about learning the jewelry, or you know, whatever it is that you're thinking. Like we're at the beginning of 2024 now, so whatever it is that you're thinking, just try something different and just see. And it might not change your mind, or it might make you actually realize that what you've got is way better than you thought it was in the first place. It can go one way or another, can't it? So but yeah, oh well, that is amazing. And amazing that you're sober for 6 years. That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I
Thank
do
you.
drink, but I'm like literally listening to you thinking, okay, because it's a lot of people doing dry January, and like I have definitely cut back on my drinking. I don't have the time anymore to have a hangover. I don't, like you said, it's that clarity. I want to be, you know, getting up in the morning and being productive and doing things. I don't want to be lying in bed like bemoaning how much I hate my life and I'm never going to drink again, and then rinse repeat the next week. That was like my 20s and some of my 30s. Now I'm in my 40s. I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. But I do still enjoy a drink. So now I'm thinking, oh, okay, so you're not the first friend that has said to me, oh, okay, like I'm sober and it's great. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and it's, you know, one of the things about that I hear quite a bit from people is it's so funny, because I think when we think about people who get sober and quit drinking, we think that they're all these people who have really intense problems with alcohol. And especially with a lot of women I'm meeting a ton of women who got sober and there was no crazy bottom. There was no crazy experience that made them, you know, decide that they had to get sober. So yeah, it's really interesting, because I think there is a little bit of that mindset, like, oh, well, I'm not an alcoholic, so I don't need to stop drinking. But what if we could just improve our lives, you know? And not everybody has to stop completely, but you know, or just sort of like looking at your relationship with alcohol can help a lot.
And again, you said that though, didn't you? Because you said, you know, you were drinking, but you weren't drinking to excess. You probably weren't falling over drunk. You weren't waking up in pools of sick, what you automatically assume that an alcoholic is doing. Although I think a lot of alcoholics manage to contain themselves and like
a lot
functioning.
Yes.
So it's almost like, and especially in Britain, we have a massive binge drinking culture, or we used to. So kind of my era growing up, I feel like the younger generations aren't like this and don't really drink as heavily as we did. But we had pubs on every corner, and you know, you went to the pub from 5 o'clock when you finished work, and you drank as much as you possibly could until 11 p.m. when they closed. And then like, that's kind of what you did on a weeknight or on a weekend or whatever. And so that's kind of the culture that you've grown up in. But like you said, you weren't drinking a lot, and you again just did something different, and then you've got that. I think it's that mental clarity that you're talking about that kind of like triggers like an idea with me, because I'm like, oh, like if you could be more creative, and somebody said the way to be more creative is maybe stop drinking alcohol, or you know, at least cut back on it. I mean, did you find it difficult to just stop, or were you just like, fine?
So that's interesting. So I did, very honestly, I did go to a 12-step recovery program
Okay.
because I had been in, there's a program called Al-Anon, which is for families of
Yeah.
alcoholics. And so I'd gone to that to deal with my ex and his drinking. And so then when I decided to get sober, I said, oh, let me go to AA. And I didn't really feel like it was my place, but I decided to still do the work. I was like, let me do these steps. And what the steps really are is, for me, it was more self-discovery. And I love self-work and personal growth.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think a lot of people think that, again, it's just for alcoholics. Well, yeah, it's AA, it's for alcoholics, but those steps are universal. The steps that they ask you to take to really, it's about looking at yourself, the reasons why you drank. So it became much bigger for me. And I was like, whoa. So that was something that really opened my eyes and was extremely life-changing too.
Yeah, I love that. It's like a personal coaching journey. I love everything to do with personal development. I've been on my own personal development mission for years, and I just think it's one of those things that you can never stop learning about yourself, because there's always an extra layer of the onion to peel off, isn't there? And then that makes sense. So, and I guess with being a creative, that also helps you to understand, if you were maybe turning to the bottle, could you maybe turn to, the clay wheel, or create a piece of jewelry, or, scribble down in artwork. We encourage children to get their emotions out in artwork. And I think we forget it as we get older. And I remember, I know somebody who had a child, and they were separating, the parents were separating, and he was coloring black all the time, but they didn't realize it. I think it's like upon reflection, like from looking back. And it's like, obviously he was maybe 18 months, couple of years old, so he's like obviously hearing what's going on, the arguments and stuff, and it's coming out in the colors that he's picking up to color with. It's so bizarre. So we do it naturally, and I just think we forget about the joy of getting emotions out, don't we, when we're grown up, because then we fall into those categories of, you should do this, you shouldn't do this, don't do this, oh, why would you do that, or the judgments of friends, or Becky from school, or whatever, whatever you say. So I love that. You kind of just opening a world up to me. I kind of just want to go and get pens and paper and just color everything.
Well, I believe there is really something to that too, because I believe in the inner child, the feeling that we had as a child. That's where our creativity lives, where, kids don't care about, or they're not worried about making messy art. They're going to color outside the lines and do all this cool stuff. And the world is just so expansive when you're a kid, because we haven't been put in these boxes of the shoulds, like you say. Yeah. So there is really a magic in tapping into that inner child place. One of the things that I do regularly when I need to be re-inspired is I watch kids movies, especially the Disney Pixar ones, because there's pieces in there for adults too.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Not just for children, but I think of there was one, I believe, called Up, and this man, his house is taken to Peru by all these balloons. And I'm like, how amazing is that? I'm looking at it, my adult self is going, well, all those balloons would never carry that house to Peru. But then I was like, what if I was a kid? I would be watching this and going, oh my God, this is so cool. Of course those balloons are going to carry that house.
Yeah,
so there's something to that, just tapping back into that wonder, that magic, and what is possible.
Yeah, we've all know that person in our life, don't we, that goes, well, that would never happen. When you're watching a film, that would never happen, that's not practical, that can't happen. You're just just let me enjoy the film.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a massive Disney fan, and I love those Disney Pixar ones as well. So I'm completely with you on that. And I think everybody should, be able to play. And I'd love to. I've got kind of a secret dream that I don't know how this will ever come about, because I'm going down a different line at the moment. But we'll put it out there. I'd like to have just a play area for adults that also contains, I don't know, maybe some coaching or counselling rooms. But you walk in and there's a ball pit. There's you can draw on the walls and we can magically wipe them off or whatever. you can have a food fight, you can do all the things that we get told that we shouldn't be doing as adults because we've got to be responsible for cleaning or organizing or tidying. And like you said, just like let that happy inner child out, because like so many times, like that's our repressed self as an adult, isn't it? I feel like we've gotten really deep here, but I love it because I feel like this is massively beneficial for anybody who's listening. So I guess anybody who's listening, like if you had something that you liked doing as a child, take the next weekend whenever you're listening to this and go and see if you can try and recreate that, whether that's climbing a tree, whether that's going and doing handstands or cartwheels on the grass, just playing kickabout with a ball, colouring in, whatever it is. Don't colour inside the lines. Colour the grass purple and the sky like, I don't know, yellow or whatever, whatever it is. Don't follow like society's rules and see how you feel, I guess, when you're doing it. So
it's that do something different, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think
that.
it's a little uncomfortable, especially if we are in our little routines, like, oh, coloring outside the line sounds scary, like feels scary, or this doesn't feel right. So, but sometimes, or I think anything, you know, so many of us are afraid to suck at something new, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, it's getting into that, like, oh, this is uncomfortable because I'm just not used to being imperfect or having fun or whatever it is. But it's almost like a practice that we can bring into our lives.
I love that, definitely. And failure is just like fail is first attempt in learning. That's it. Like we don't fail. And like you said, I think it's that fear. And if we can't even get over the fear of colouring outside the lines because somebody might say something to us, then we're never going to be able to kind of progress our lives forward in the way that we want them to, because we'll hit like hella bigger fear things than like, you know, that type of thing. So I love that. I feel like that's massively beneficial. So do you bring out I'm coming back to your jewelry now. Do you bring out like new collections? Do you just kind of have like inspiration of, oh, this is like, you see something and think, this is what I'm going to go and make? Where did your inspiration hit you from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I try to design both collections, and then I really love to do one-of-a-kind pieces. So my jewelry tends to be very gemstone focused because that was my first love. You know, I went to the Gemological Institute of America before I was even manufacturing, because gems were just like, that was it. That was what made me fall in love with jewelry. So a lot of my designs are based around really fantastic gemstones. And I launched a new series on my Instagram for fantasy jewelry, all about like gemstone facts. And it's made me go not hugely viral, but I just had a reel that has over 200,000 views on it.
Wow.
So I've been having a lot of fun just talking about gems because it's something I'm so lit up by. And clearly my people love it too, because I've gone viral. You know,
oh, that's awesome.
I don't have hundreds of thousands of followers yet, but that's been really fun. So yeah, I will do collections because it's helpful, like larger collections, because I need to have pieces that are easily reproducible so that I can spend time doing the one-of-a-kind stuff with the gemstones, which is really what I love to do. So really a lot of my inspiration, I mean, it comes from the gems first, but a lot of my designs are just inspired by life. Like we were talking about the hurricane experience, and I have a collection called the Sun collection. It's very, very basic because, marketing, we want to be specific. Yep. So it's just called the Sun collection. But that collection basically came out of my 2017 experience that I just described. One little tiny piece that I left out of that was that after the hurricane, I wasn't sure what my place was, because there were people, doing all these amazing things. Like my guy friends were going and getting, like, chopping down trees and getting people out of their driveways. My former partner was a chef, so he started cooking huge community meals because we had a generator, so we were able to have power, and so we were cooking for people. And I was like, my gosh, I feel like, what can I do?
Yeah, what's your purpose?
Yeah. And the answer that came to me was just be kind. And that sounds like so trite and so simple, but a lot of people after the hurricane just needed a hug. They needed somebody to be nice to them. And I really just like, and I would bring cold water to our maintenance guys and things like that, just little tiny acts of kindness. But let me tell you, it made the whole experience, like it's that idea that when you do something nice for somebody, they don't just get lit up, but you get lit up too.
Yeah.
So there was that whole experience. So my sun collection was the idea of actually being the light.
Oh,
And
that's beautiful.
the center of the sun design is actually a spiral, which is like the hurricane.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's wonderful. Oh, I
Yeah,
love
so
that for
sometimes the
inspiration.
collections come from a very deep place like that, and it's interesting because that's the creative process, in my opinion, is like we have something that we want to express in another form, right? Like I wanted to take this feeling and put it into jewelry. And unless I tell that story, nobody's going to get it. But when I tell that story to my customers, they're like, "Oh my God, that's really
Yes.
cool." And I tell
Yes.
them, I'm like, we all have these moments, their experience doesn't have to be a hurricane, but it can be like we all have moments that we're in the dark and we come out of them and remember our own light, basically.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think also that's really good in the fact that it's about kind of, like you said, coming out of the dark and into the light. But if you want to do something creative, just trust your gut, trust that it's coming from somewhere, trust that, like, try not to put your barriers and blocks up like you would naturally do, and be like, just go with the flow, I guess. And like, if it feels like it feels right, then just go with it and see what happens. But
And I think more of us need to do that, right? We need to
yeah.
to take that action. Clarity comes from action. That's a little soundbite that keeps coming back to me this year.
Yeah.
Sure, we might make a mistake. It might not be the perfect thing, but yeah, we need to. That's how we start creating whatever it's going to be. Not every creation, whether it's a piece of art or, anything that we're putting out into the world, is going to be a home run. And that's, I always think about that. Like they're not all going to be home runs, but they're all pieces in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. On a kind of a descriptive note on that, somebody once said to me, and this really resonated with me, it's like Apple iPhones. Can anybody remember the first one? Like it might have worked for them at the time, it didn't, and then it wasn't perfect. They tweaked it and changed it and made another one, and then every year they're bringing out a different one, and it's never perfect on the day that they bring it out. There's always updates to it, and nobody can remember what the first ones were in the first place. And so I think that goes with everybody's, with life, with business, with trying something new, with creativity. It's like just do it. You can always redo it and tweak it. You can always delete it if it's online. It's like with our podcasts, because I know you've got a podcast as well. It's like, just put it out there, do it messy, get it out there. Like, you can always go back and edit it if you need to at a different date. But I really like not editing mine. I like kind of like the raw, uncut, this is how we're rolling version of it. But that kind of like segues nicely. So you've got a fabulous podcast, haven't you? Creative Minds, Brilliant Life.
Yes.
So what's your podcast about?
So a lot of it is kind of what we were talking about here. I believe that the creative process is just a vehicle for living our best lives. And the creative, a lot of people do know that they are creative. And I hear so many people tell me that they are not creative. And the truth is, all of us as humans are creatives. And as women, we are especially creatives. Like we are the ultimate creators because we create life, right? Like there is nothing more creative. And, the creative process is really about gosh, I don't know why I'm getting having a hard time saying this because there's so much to say. So the creative process is really about taking something that I believe it's very divine, like it comes from something that's beyond us as humans, and bringing it into the world, bringing it into life. Because I think that most people are looking for inspiration, and not everybody knows exactly that that's what they're looking for. We're looking for a feeling. And I call it inspiration because I'm an artist. But most of us, we want to feel lit up all the time. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And so that's what I'm really wanting to talk about in my podcast, is the creative experience as it relates to people who are actually artists, but how we also bring that to other people who maybe don't identify as artists. So we can inspire the people who need the inspiration, who need to kind of be consuming the creativity.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's really good. Like, you can inspire other people. And when I worked on cruise ships, actually, one of the art directors said to me, a piece of art should make you feel something. You might hate it, but it makes you feel something, and that's how you know that it's a good piece of art. So I think that wanting to inspire people, like, also comes from like your inspiration, isn't it? You know, again, it's inspiring and inspiration, but I think it comes back to your, you know, finding joy, my Following the Joy podcast. It's just, we want people to kind of just be themselves, be happy, and just try something. And like coming back to what you were saying before about the hurricanes, it's like finding that purpose, isn't it? And I think most of our purpose, if we drill down into it, comes from a place of love, doesn't it? It's like we either want to help people, inspire people, we want to like lift other people up. So it all comes from that kind of like warm heart centered place of love. So oh you're just fabulous.
I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I love it.
Now let me ask you one more question. Do you do bespoke pieces of jewelry for people? Because everybody needs to check you out.
So in theory, I do. I've been booked for a very long time on bespoke.
Oh, wow.
So I don't see it opening in 2024.
Nice.
So
okay.
we will, yeah, I do have quite a bit of regular business on the bespoke side. So I made the most beautiful diamond ring of my entire career in 2023. So
oh, wow.
that was a lot of fun. So maybe it will be happening again in the future, but for right now, no open commissions.
Do you ever make a piece for somebody and think, oh, I really don't want to give this to you because I love it so much, I want to keep it for myself?
So that's a great question, because when I started making jewelry, I wanted to keep everything that I made. And I had to go through this like personal development thing on it. Like, no, I can just be just as happy knowing that I'm going to make somebody else happy with this piece than if I were to keep it for myself. And I really had to like change my mindset on that. And when I look at it like that, it makes it much easier to send my babies out into the world.
Yeah.
My
and know that
creations.
because you can't possibly wear everything. Like, you know, you've probably made, thousands of pieces. You can't possibly wear everything all the time. So it's nice to know that, I guess, somebody else is wearing it and finding joy in it. So.
And then the thing is, I can always make myself whatever I want at any time. I'm terrible about that, though. I very rarely make myself jewelry.
It's the same thing, though, that you probably don't have the time because you're doing other pieces, and obviously you're very busy and successful, which is awesome. So yeah, maybe you need to find time to make yourself a special piece.
Yes, I think 2024 is going to be a big year of remembering to take care of myself as well, not just everybody else.
So if you don't mind sharing, what's your words for 2024? Do you know?
So it is create.
Oh, nice.
Yes,
this
is a year. So I'm almost afraid to say this because it could just bring us into a whole long conversation. But, there is this place of like, you have to have the business structure when you run a creative business. And then you also still have to find time in the creative. And that's been my struggle for so many years, like why I closed my first business. So I've had a few years that were I call it like masculine energy focused, where I've just really had to grind and work really hard. And a lot of the things I've really set myself up in a way that I'm good now. And there were other things in my life that happened that I had to just be really doing a lot of hard work. And this is the year that a lot of those things have just sort of settled, and I'm feeling more into the feminine energy, which is the energy of creation.
Yeah.
So that's why 2024 just feels like a year of creating. And so it's super exciting that, my podcast just launched at the beginning of the year too.
Yep, I see good things for you. I can't wait to see how it all comes out. My words are adventure, love, and abundance.
Oh, amazing. I love it. I love it.
I'm just putting it out there and we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But right, let me try and do a kind of like, because at the end of every one of these interviews, I like to try and do like a summary of like takeaways for my lovely listeners. So I think we've covered so much, but I think do something different was definitely one of them. Just kind of dialing into that inner child, like you said, and playing and kind of getting over the fear of what one or two people have said to you in your life, and that's just solely their opinion. And your vibe is your tribe. Yes.
I was hoping you were going to mention that one, because that's a good one.
I think this has been awesome. Thank you ever so much, Nicole. It's been a genuine pleasure talking to you. I could talk to you for hours, and I will definitely be following your podcast and probably buying pieces of jewelry from you and maybe being like, hello, now you know me, can I come and visit you in the Caribbean?
Absolutely. I will open the invitation. You are welcome to come visit. This has been amazing.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you get free accommodation in foreign countries. Right, brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Nicole. And I will stop it there.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And as always, any links or anything mentioned will be in the show notes. If you haven't connected with me yet, I'd love to meet you. So come find me on Instagram at Debbie Westwell. Why not slide into my DMs and tell me what you thought of this episode? And if you like what you hear, then please follow me or hit the bell icon, share with somebody like you who would benefit from listening, and all positive reviews are greatly appreciated. Thank you for being your wonderful self, and I can't wait to chat next time.